What would you do if you had exactly 1 hour left before losing everything you'd ever built? Would you sign the papers? Or would you listen to a stranger serving coffee in the lobby? At 9 a.m., Alexei Volkov was a millionaire about to become bankrupt. At 11 a.m., he was still a millionaire. What happened in those 2 hours would change his life forever, and it all started with a cup of coffee. The clock on the wall read 9:07 a.m. when Alexei Volkov realized he had stopped breathing. Not literally, of course. His chest still rose and fell. His heart still beat its tired rhythm. But somewhere between the sleepless night and this gray St. Petersburg morning, he had forgotten how to take a full breath. Each inhale felt shallow, incomplete, like his lungs had decided there wasn't much point anymore. He sat alone in his office on the 7th floor, surrounded by the ghosts of better days. The headquarters of Volkov Industries had once hummed with energy, phones ringing, assistants rushing through hallways, the steady pulse of a business that mattered. Now it was silent. The kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums. The kind that made you aware of every creak in the floorboards, every distant car horn from the street below. Most of the staff had been let go months ago. The ones who remained had found new jobs and stopped showing up without bothering to resign officially. Alexei couldn't blame them. When a ship is sinking, only a fool stays on deck. On his desk sat a stack of documents. 43 pages, to be exact. He knew because he'd counted them last night at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, unable to look away. Bankruptcy papers. The official death certificate of everything he'd built over 22 years. His lawyer would arrive at 10 a.m. to witness the signing. His estranged wife, still technically his business partner, would be there too, though they'd barely spoken in 8 months. She'd probably look relieved, maybe even satisfied. He'd failed spectacularly, and there was a certain vindication in watching someone fall when you'd predicted they would. Alexei ran his hand across his face. When had he gotten so old? 53 wasn't ancient, but the man in the reflection of his dark computer screen looked decades older. Gray stubble he hadn't bothered to shave. Eyes that had lost their fire. His father used to say you could tell everything about a man by looking at his eyes. "Show me a man with dead eyes," his father would say, "and I'll show you a man who's already buried." Alexei's eyes were dead. He'd built this company from nothing. Absolutely nothing. In 2003, fresh out of university with a degree in engineering and $500 borrowed from his uncle, he'd started importing industrial equipment from Germany. Small stuff at first, tools, parts, machinery that Russian factories desperately needed as the country rebuilt itself after the chaos of the 90s. He'd been hungry then. Fearless. He'd work 18-hour days, sleep on the floor of his tiny office, survive on black bread and cheaper coffee. Every deal mattered. Every client was a battle one. And slowly, painfully, gloriously, he'd built something real. By 2010, Volkov Industries employed 47 people. By 2015, over 200. They'd expanded beyond imports into manufacturing, into distribution networks that stretched across 3 countries. Alexei had bought his parents a house. He'd married Irina, a brilliant woman who managed the company's finances with an iron will. They talked about children, about legacy, about building something that would outlast them both. And then, piece by piece, it had all come apart. First, the market shifted. Chinese manufacturers flooded in with cheaper alternatives. Contracts that had seemed solid evaporated overnight. Then came the embezzlement. His trusted CFO had been siphoning money for years, covering his tracks with creative accounting that no one noticed until it was too late. By the time they discovered it, over 3 million euros were gone, and the CFO had disappeared to somewhere without an extradition treaty. The lawsuits followed. Suppliers demanding payment. Clients canceling orders. Banks calling in loans. And through it all, Alexei fought. God, how he'd fought. He'd restructured, downsized, taken out personal loans against his house, his car, everything he owned. He'd begged investors for more time. He'd worked until his hands shook from exhaustion. But you can only swim against the current for so long before your arms give out. Irina had left 6 months ago. Not officially divorced, but gone in every way that mattered. She'd looked at him one evening across the dinner table, one of the few meals they still shared in their increasingly empty apartment, and said, "You're drowning, Alexei. And I can't drown with you." He hadn't fought her. What was there to say? She was right. The final blow came 3 weeks ago when his last major client, a manufacturing plant in Ekaterinburg that represented 30% of his remaining revenue, canceled their contract. Nothing personal, they'd said. Just business. As if those words made betrayal easier to swallow. That night, Alexei had finally accepted the truth he'd been running from. It was over. His lawyer had been gentle, almost kind, when presenting the bankruptcy option. "It's not failure, Alexei. It's pragmatism. You've fought honorably. Sometimes the honorable thing is knowing when to stop." So here he was. 9:14 a.m. 46 minutes until he signed away everything. 46 minutes until Alexei Volkov, entrepreneur, employer, builder of things, became just another cautionary tale. Another ambitious man who'd reached too high and fallen too far. He should feel something, he thought. Anger, maybe. Grief. But there was only numbness. A vast, empty exhaustion that had settled into his bones. The door to his office opened without a knock. Alexei looked up, annoyed. He'd locked the main entrance downstairs. Who could possibly? It was Elena, the woman from the cafe. She stood in the doorway holding a small paper cup, steam rising from the lid. Mid-40s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back simply. She wore the cafe's standard uniform, black pants, white shirt, green apron. He'd seen her hundreds of times over the past 2 years, working in the small coffee shop on the building's ground floor. He'd ordered from her maybe twice. Usually, he was too preoccupied to notice the person handing him his espresso. "I'm sorry," Alexei said, his voice rough from disuse. "I didn't order anything." "I know," Elena said quietly. She stepped inside, uninvited, and set the cup on his desk. "But I thought you might need it anyway." There was something in her tone. Not pity, exactly. Something else. Something that made Alexei pause. "Thank you," he said carefully. "But I have an appointment soon. I need to." "You're making a mistake." The words hung in the air between them. Alexei blinked. "Excuse me?" Elena didn't move. Didn't look away. "I said you're making a mistake. Those papers on your desk. You're about to sign them, aren't you?" A cold thread of anger cut through Alexei's numbness. Who was this woman? How dare she? "That's none of your business," he said, his voice harder now. "I don't know what you think you know about my situation, but—" "I know you're filing for bankruptcy," Elena interrupted. Her voice remained steady, calm. "I know because I've watched you for 2 years. I've seen you come in earlier and leave later. I've watched the people disappear from this building floor by floor. And I know that look in your eyes. I had the same look 6 years ago." Alexei wanted to tell her to leave, to mind her own business. But something kept him silent. Elena took a breath. "I used to be an accountant. Senior accountant, actually, at Meridian Finance Group. Do you know it?" He nodded slightly. Everyone in St. Petersburg business circles knew Meridian. "I worked there for 11 years, Elena continued. "I was good at my job. Very good. Until my supervisor got caught running a fraud scheme, funneling client money into personal accounts, falsifying records. When everything came out, he blamed me. Said I was the one who'd set it up, that I'd manipulated him. He had connections. Friends in the right places. And I had nothing. No proof. No protection." She said it without drama, just flat statement of fact. But Alexei could hear the old wound beneath the words. "They fired me. Blacklisted me, really. No firm would touch me after that. My reputation was destroyed." Elena's eyes met his. "So, I started serving coffee. Because you do what you have to do to survive." The office felt very quiet. "I'm sorry that happened to you," Alexei said finally. "But I don't see what." "Let me look at your papers." "What?" Elena gestured to the bankruptcy documents. "Let me look at them." "Before you sign." "Just let me see." Alexei almost laughed. "You want to review my bankruptcy filing? You work in a cafe." "No offense, but—" "I worked in a cafe because no one else would hire me," Elena said. But I'm still an accountant. I still know how to read a balance sheet, how to spot inconsistencies, how to see what others miss. It's the one thing they couldn't take from me. There was no anger in her voice, no desperation, just a quiet, absolute certainty. Alexei looked at her, really looked at her, for perhaps the first time. This woman who'd handed him countless coffees, who'd existed in his peripheral vision as part of the building's furniture. Who is she really? And why did she care? Why, he asked. Why do you want to help me? Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. Because 6 years ago, I was sitting where you are, ready to give up, ready to accept that I was beaten. And no one helped me. No one even looked. They all just walked past. She paused. I don't want to be someone who walks past. Something in Alexei's chest cracked. Just a little. Just enough to let in a sliver of something that might have been hope, or might have been simply the willingness to delay the inevitable. 15 minutes, he heard himself say. That's all. Then I have to. 15 minutes, Elena agreed. She moved around his desk without hesitation, professional and focused. Alexei slid the papers toward her and watched as she began to read. Her eyes moved quickly, efficiently, scanning pages with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this thousands of times before. The clock ticked. 9:22 a.m. Alexei picked up the coffee she'd brought. It was still hot. He sipped it and watched this stranger, this cafe server, this fallen accountant, pour over the documents that represented his life's work in its final, ugly form. Her finger traced a line on page 7. Stopped. Moved back up. Her brow furrowed. She flipped to page 12. Then back to 7. Then forward to 15. Alexei felt his heart begin to beat faster. What? What is it? Elena didn't answer immediately. She was deep in the numbers now, completely absorbed. She pulled out page 18, laid it next to page 7, compared them side by side. Her eyes narrowed. 9:31 a.m. Finally, Elena looked up. Her face was very serious. When she spoke, her voice was absolutely steady, absolutely certain. These numbers, she said. They're wrong. And just like that, everything changed. For a moment, Alexei couldn't speak. Wrong, he finally managed. What do you mean, wrong? Elena's finger moved across the page, pointing to a column of figures. Here. Section 4C. Asset valuations. You've listed your warehouse equipment twice, once under fixed assets and again under depreciated holdings. The total value is being counted double, which inflates your debt-to-asset ratio. Alexei leaned forward, his exhaustion suddenly pierced by something sharp and urgent. That can't be right. My lawyer reviewed everything. Your lawyer copied from your last financial statement, Elena interrupted, flipping to another page. Look. These revenue projections are dated October 2024. That's over a year old. But your actual receivables, the money people actually owe you, that's current. You have outstanding invoices here totaling 847,000 euros. But your lawyer's filing shows projected revenue of only 320,000 euros for this quarter. She spread 3 pages across the desk, side by side, creating a map of numbers that Alexei had stopped being able to see clearly months ago. When you're drowning, everything becomes a blur. And here, Elena continued, her voice gaining momentum now, the voice of someone who'd found her element again after years in exile. Your debt schedule. You've listed the Petrobank loan at its original principal, euro 2.3 million. But you've been making payments for 3 years. Your current balance should be closer to 1.6 million euros. Someone used old numbers. Alexei felt his hands beginning to shake. Are you saying? I'm saying this filing is based on outdated and inaccurate information. Elena looked at him directly, and there was fire in her eyes now. Real fire. According to these documents, you're insolvent. Your debts exceed your assets by a substantial margin, which makes bankruptcy your only legal option. But if these numbers are correct, the actual, current numbers, you're not insolvent. You're struggling, yes. You're in trouble, but you're not dead. The words hit Alexei like electricity. For 6 months he'd been walking through fog, accepting his fate with the resigned numbness of a condemned man. And now this woman, this stranger who served coffee, was telling him the execution might be based on a clerical error. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "My lawyer is good. He's been practicing for 30 years. How could he miss this?" Elena's expression softened slightly. "Because he's not an accountant. Lawyers see documents. Accountants see numbers. And more importantly," she hesitated, then continued, "he probably assumed you wanted to file, that you'd given up. So he stopped looking for reasons not to." The truth of that landed like a punch. Had Alexei given up? Yes, completely. And everyone around him had seen it: his lawyer, his wife, his few remaining business associates. They'd all watched him sink and assumed he wanted to drown. So they'd stopped throwing ropes. 9:43 a.m. 17 minutes until his lawyer arrived. "I need to verify this," Alexei said, his mind suddenly racing, suddenly alive. "I need to check the actual numbers, pull current statements." "Yes," Elena agreed. "You need a full audit. Real-time data. Not projections from a year ago." She gathered the pages carefully, rest-hacking them. "But you can't sign these. Not until you know the truth." Alexei stood, pacing now, energy flooding back into limbs that had felt leaden for months. Could this be real? Could he actually have been about to destroy something that could still be saved? "Why didn't anyone catch this?" he asked, more to himself than to Elena. "The bank, the creditors, why didn't they?" "Because everyone sees what they expect to see," Elena said quietly. "You expected to fail. Your lawyer expected you to fail. So, when the numbers suggested failure, no one questioned them. That's how these things happen. That's how I lost everything, because once people decide you're guilty, they stop looking for evidence that you're not." There was old pain in those words. The pain of someone who'd been crushed by assumptions, by carelessness, by the simple human tendency to accept a convenient narrative rather than dig for complicated truth. Alexei looked at this woman, really looked at her, and saw not a cafe server but what she had been, what she still was underneath the uniform and the years of diminishment. A professional. Someone who'd been good at her work before being destroyed by someone else's crime. Someone like him. The sound of footsteps in the hallway broke the moment. Multiple footsteps. Alexei's chest tightened. "They're early." The door opened. His lawyer, Viktor Sokolov, entered first, 60 years old, expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Elena made in 3 months. Behind him came Irina, Alexei's wife, ex-wife in everything but legal documentation. Looked exactly as he remembered. 49, but could pass for 40. Perfectly styled auburn hair. A gray business suit that was both professional and subtly expensive. Once, he'd loved the way she carried herself, that unshakable confidence. Now it just made him tired. "Alexei," Viktor said, his tone brisk and businesslike. "Good, you're ready. Let's get this done quickly. I have another appointment at 11. Irina said nothing. She took a seat in one of the chairs facing his desk, crossed her legs, and studied her manicured nails with the detached interest of someone waiting for a routine medical procedure to be completed. Neither of them appeared to notice Elena. Or if they did, they dismissed her instantly. Just the coffee girl, not worth acknowledging. Something hot and sharp flared in Alexei's chest. "I'm not signing," he said. Viktor, who'd been pulling documents from his briefcase, froze. "What?" "I said I'm not signing. Not yet." Irina's head snapped up. Her eyes narrowed. "Alexei, we discussed this. It's over. You agreed." "I agreed based on information that might be incorrect." Alexei's voice was stronger now, steadier than it had been in months. "There are errors in the filing. Significant errors." Viktor's expression shifted from surprise to poorly concealed impatience. "Errors? Alexei, I've reviewed everything personally. The numbers are solid. You're insolvent. Bankruptcy is the only. The warehouse equipment is listed twice," Elena said. All eyes turned to her. It was the first time Viktor and Irina had really registered her presence. "I'm sorry," Victor said with a particular condescension reserved for people he considered beneath his notice. Who are you? My name is Elena Petrova. I'm an accountant. An accountant? Irina's tone was poisonous. You're wearing a cafe uniform. I work in a cafe, Elena corrected calmly. But I'm still an accountant. And the warehouse equipment is listed twice in the asset valuation. Section 4C and Section 7B. That's an error that substantially impacts the debt-to-asset calculation. Victor's face flushed. That's absurd. I checked every. And the revenue projections are from October 2024, Elena continued, unshaken. But the current receivables show 847,000 euros in outstanding invoices. The filing projects only 320,000 euros in revenue for this quarter. That's a discrepancy of over €500,000. The room went very quiet. Victor set down his briefcase slowly. Let me see those pages. Elena handed them over. Alexei watched as his lawyer, his expensive, experienced, 30 years of practice lawyer, scanned the documents with a growing expression of something that might have been concern or might have been embarrassment. These are the numbers you provided, Victor said finally, but his voice had lost its certainty. These are the numbers from the financial statement dated October 2024, Elena replied. Has anyone verified them against current account balances? Victor didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was written all over his face. Irina stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Alexei, you can't possibly be taking financial advice from a coffee server. This is desperation talking. You're grasping at. She found errors you missed. Alexei cut in. His voice was sharp now, almost angry. In 15 minutes, she found multiple substantive errors that you, my lawyer, didn't catch in weeks of preparation. I used the documentation you gave me, Victor protested. How was I supposed to know? You were supposed to verify, Alexei shot back. That's your job. To verify. To question. To make sure we're not making decisions based on outdated information. Irina's face had gone hard. So, what are you suggesting? That we delay this? That we pretend everything is fine and keep hemorrhaging money while you what? Chase some fantasy that it's all a mistake. I'm suggesting, Alexei said, and he was surprised by how calm he sounded, how clear, that we do a full, current audit before I sign away everything I've built. Is that really so unreasonable? It's a waste of time, Irina said flatly. And money we don't have. Then let me waste my time and my money, Alexei replied. You've already left. You've already given up. But this is still my company. And I won't kill it based on numbers that might be wrong. Something passed across Irina's face then, surprise, maybe, or something else. For 6 months, Alexei had been passive, defeated, accepting every piece of bad news with the hollow resignation of a man already dead. This was the first time since she'd left that he'd pushed back. The first time he'd shown any fight. She didn't like it. Fine, Irina said coldly. Waste your time. But I won't be part of this delusion. She turned to Victor. Call me when he comes to his senses. She walked out without another word, heels clicking sharply against the floor. Victor remained, looking uncomfortable. Alexei, I understand you're upset, but I want a full audit, Alexei said. Current balances. Current asset valuations. Current receivables. Everything. And I want it done by someone who actually checks the numbers instead of just copying old reports. Victor's jaw tightened. That will take time. And it will cost. I'll pay for it, Alexei said. However much it costs. But I won't sign these papers until I know, absolutely know, that they're accurate. For a long moment, Victor simply stared at him. Then, slowly, he nodded. All right. I'll arrange for an independent auditor. But Alexei, he paused. Don't get your hopes up. Even if there are some discrepancies, the fundamental situation hasn't changed. You're in serious financial trouble. I know, Alexei said. But there's a difference between serious trouble and death. And I need to know which one I'm actually facing. Victor packed his briefcase in silence. At the door, he paused and glanced back at Elena, still standing quietly beside Alexei's desk. You found all that in 15 minutes. 12 minutes, Elena corrected. Something flickered in Victor's expression. Respect, maybe, or simply the recognition of competence. He nodded once, then left. The door closed. Alexei and Elena stood alone in the silent office. The clock read 10:08 a.m. 8 minutes past the hour when everything was supposed to have ended. Alexei's legs suddenly felt weak. He sank into his chair, his heart pounding. "I was about to sign," he said quietly. "If you hadn't come in here, I would have signed." "I know," Elena said. "Why did you come? Really?" Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "Because I've spent 6 years watching people walk past me, looking through me, dismissing me because I serve coffee instead of sitting in a boardroom. And I understand it, I really do. When you fall, people stop seeing you. You become invisible." She met his eyes. "But I still see things. I still notice. And I noticed that you were about to make the same mistake I made 6 years ago, accepting other people's judgments without questioning them, believing you were worthless because everyone around you treated you like you were." Her voice hardened slightly. "I couldn't let you do that. Not if there was even a chance I could help." Alexei felt something break inside him. Not breaking like damage, breaking like a dam. He'd been so alone. For so long, so completely alone. And this woman, this stranger, had seen him when no one else would even look. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "Thank you." Elena smiled. A real smile. Warm and genuine. "You're welcome." 3 weeks later, the audit results came back. Alexei sat in his office, the same office, but somehow it felt different now, felt less like a tomb, and read through the independent auditor's report. Elena sat across from him, no longer in a cafe uniform but in professional business attire. He'd offered her a position immediately after the audit was commissioned. Consultant initially, but they both knew it would become something more permanent. The auditor's findings were comprehensive and damning, but not in the way Victor's original filing had suggested. Yes, Volkov Industries was in financial difficulty. Serious difficulty. The debt was real, the lost contracts were real, the damage from the embezzlement was real. But the company was not insolvent. The corrected asset valuation showed 4.2 million euros in tangible assets, not the 2.8 million euros reported in the bankruptcy filing. The updated receivables showed 847,000 euros owed, with 612,000 euros considered collectible within 90 days. The debt load, properly calculated and adjusted for payments made, totaled 3.1 million euros, substantial, but not insurmountable. Most critically, the auditor had identified a pathway forward. With aggressive restructuring, renegotiation of payment terms with major creditors, and the collection of outstanding receivables, Volkov Industries could return to solvency within 18 months. It would be hard, brutally hard. Alexei would have to cut deeper, work smarter, and fight for every euro. But it was possible. He wouldn't have to file for bankruptcy. He wouldn't have to destroy what he'd built. "We can do this," Elena said, reading over his shoulder. "It won't be easy, but we can do this." Alexei looked up at her. This woman who'd walked into his office 3 weeks ago with a cup of coffee and 15 minutes of courage. This woman who'd seen what everyone else had missed, not just the numerical errors, but him. The person underneath the failure. The man still worth saving. "I couldn't do it alone," he said. "You're not alone," Elena replied simply. And she was right. He wasn't. Not anymore. The road ahead was long and uncertain. Irina had formally filed for divorce 2 weeks ago, unwilling to be part of what she called this doomed crusade. Victor had referred him to a different firm, one more suited to optimistic restructuring, as he'd termed it with barely concealed skepticism. Some of his creditors were furious about the delayed bankruptcy, sensing they'd lose leverage in a restructuring plan. But Alexei was fighting again. Really fighting. Not the desperate, drowning flailing of a man going under, but the calculated, determined effort of someone who'd found a reason to survive. Every morning he came to the office. Every morning, Elena was already there, working through accounts, calling creditors, identifying inefficiencies and opportunities that had been invisible when he'd been too exhausted to see straight. She'd been right about everything. The duplicate listings, the outdated projections, the path forward that existed if you were willing to look for it. And more than that, she'd been right about him. She'd seen something worth saving when he'd stopped seeing it himself. 6 months after the day Alexei didn't sign the bankruptcy papers, Volkov Industries secured a new contract. Not a massive one, a mid-sized manufacturing firm in Kazan that needed specialty components. But it was real work, real revenue, real hope. Alexei and Elena celebrated with coffee in his office. Just coffee. The same coffee she'd brought him that morning in March when everything had changed. "Do you ever think about it?" Alexei asked. "What would have happened if you hadn't come upstairs that day?" Elena considered. "Sometimes. But I try not to dwell on alternate histories. What matters is what actually happened." "What actually happened?" Alexei repeated. "A cafe server saved my company. A fallen accountant helped a fallen businessman," Elena corrected gently. "We saved each other, I think." And that was true. Because Elena was no longer serving coffee to people who didn't see her. She was doing what she was meant to do, working with numbers, solving problems, rebuilding something worthwhile. She'd gotten her profession back, her dignity back, her sense of purpose. And Alexei had gotten something even more valuable than a second chance for his business. He'd gotten his will to fight back. That morning, that terrible, exhausted morning when he'd been ready to sign away everything, he'd been a man with dead eyes. His father's words had haunted him. "Show me a man with dead eyes, and I'll show you a man who's already buried." But he wasn't buried. Not anymore. He'd been given something most people never get, a clear view of how close he'd come to destroying himself based on incomplete information, on exhaustion, on the simple human tendency to give up when everyone around you expects you to fail. And he'd learned the most important lesson of his life. Sometimes salvation doesn't come from the people you'd expect. Not from lawyers with expensive briefcases. Not from wives who share your name, but not your struggle. Not from business partners or investors or advisors who've decided you're not worth the effort. Sometimes salvation comes from someone you've walked past every morning for 2 years without really seeing. Someone serving coffee in a green apron. Someone who remembers what it's like to fall and decides, despite everything, that she won't let someone else fall if she can help it. Alexei looked across his desk at Elena, her head bent over a spreadsheet, her expression focused and content. He'd walked past her hundreds of times, ordered coffee, said thank you in the absent, automatic way people do when they're too preoccupied to register the person on the other side of the transaction. He'd never make that mistake again. Because the truth he'd learned, the truth that would stay with him for the rest of his life, was this. The most important people aren't always the ones in the biggest offices or with the most impressive titles. Sometimes the most important person is the one who sees you when everyone else has looked away. The one who stops walking past. The one who says, with quiet courage and steady conviction, "You're making a mistake," and then stays to help you fix it.